Secretary of State, lots of big figures banded around in this sector. I just wonder, are you confident that your department has a thorough understanding of the economics of the energy industry?
Yes.
100% confident?
Well, if you're saying that we have absolute grip of every single aspect of economics and finances, and we could not improve, and therefore we are perfect, I'm not going to say that. There's always room for improvement.
Right. Okay. Well, I just wonder. I mean, recently Centrica and RWE have expressed concerns about the economics of the energy industry. And it's rather perverse because, I mean, last week the economics do not stack up for the 4 billion Atlantic array, and yet in the media you get that their profits of the big six have gone 5 times higher now than they were in the 2009. It doesn't seem, these two things don't seem to make sense to me. If you're making big profits, how come you're not investing in the energy industry?
Well, there's sort of 2 or 3 things going on there in what you've said, Dr. Lee.
No, there's not. It's about a company.
Well, I think there is.
If companies are profitable and making significant profits, why wouldn't they want to be investing in our market?
Well, let me explain why I think there are 1 or 2 things going on in your answer, because I think there are in your question. The first is you used Atlantic Array to suggest investment wasn't going forward. If you look at the decision that RWE took on Atlantic Array, we are pretty clear, they've been clear to us that it wasn't to do with economics. It was to do with technical issues, particularly the geology of the seabed in that area off the Devon coast.
The quote says economics do not stack up.
Well, yes, but why would that be? It's because they found that the geology of the seabed makes it far more expensive to invest than they had expected. And I would hope this committee wouldn't expect either the government or a company to invest in something that has turned out to be far more expensive than they originally thought.
Do you think the big 6 companies are profitable? Do you think they make profits?
Well, they are reported to make profits, and Ofgem did a recent analysis which showed that they were making profits.
I mean, I ask this because it depends, I guess, on how you look at it. I mean, the sort of gross profit reported of 65.8 billion. And yet, if you look at it in terms of total shareholder return or economic profit, the cumulative economic loss of the big 6 since 2007 is 59 billion. And more than 50% of that 59 billion is EDF, the people who we're expecting to help build Hinkley Point. Who's right? I don't quite follow.
Well, obviously, different profit levels and profit analysis may depend on the years you choose. So if you choose a base year...
Well, I've chosen a 6-year period, and I've been given this graph, which is sort of the only companies in a 6-year period on a measure of economic profit that have made profit, and it's modest, are Centrica and SSE. Iberdrola, RWE, on EDF all make significant losses, most of which have occurred over the last 3 years. And I'm just wondering, I mean, in view of the fact that the government is an investor in these companies by giving them subsidy, are we confident they're going to be around in the next 5 years? Because their shareholder value, I mean, most of them are going south, a couple of them going north, most of them going south. I mean, I just wonder, you know, is this a banking crisis equivalent that's about to happen? And what they're relying upon is the state is going to have to step in to keep the lights on.
Well, I think you're making a very interesting point, because quite a lot of the political debate suggests that these companies are making huge profits, and you're pointing out that...
But they're not making any, according to this analysis. Well, they're, with the exception possibly of these 2, they're making significant losses.
Well, I'm saying you're making an interesting point, because some of the political debate is assuming that they're making massive profits, and it may be that I'm asked questions later on by other members of the committee suggesting that they are making massive profits. You're making an argument, which is I'm saying is an interesting one, that some of them are making losses. It does depend on the time frame. I have figures in front of me which shows for the last 4 years from all segments, that's generation and supply, the average profits for the big 6 were all positive.
Yes, but that's, and this is the point, and it leads into the next question. It depends how you assess profit. If, on the other hand, if you say net operating profit after tax is X, have you taken into account the charge for the capital? Most of these accounts, if not all of them, they don't take in the charge for capital into it. If you minus that from the net operating profit, you get that. which is the economic profit, which is i.e. an economic loss. What is an appropriate return on capital? Because Ofgem told me last week that they keep it sort of 4 to 6, well, to be honest with you, he didn't really know, but 4 to 6% return on capital was acceptable. I'm being told that most of these energy companies are charging in excess of 8, 9% being charged for their capital. So there's a gap of 4 to 5% between the two, just like that. I mean, they're just operating losses. Immediately, they're just losing money. And I just wonder, is why I asked the initial question about, are you confident about your department and its understanding of the situation? Because that isn't being reported in the press. The press is all about these big energy companies. John Major's talking about windfall taxes. On what? Where's the windfall tax appear on that? They're losing money.
I'm making the point to you that it does depend on which period you're talking about. I would also make 2 points. I was quoting the last 4 years in my figures. Yeah. Obviously, if you take the different baselines, you can get different figures. I'm sure.
Yeah, sure, of course.
You appreciate. It also, and it'd be interesting to share different analysis, it also depends on which parts of their business you're talking about. I'm not just talking here about the difference between, let me finish, between supply and generation, but also which part of their companies in which countries. So you will know, because we're a very open economy, that we have a French company, 2 German companies, a Spanish company, owning 4 of the big 6. And therefore, looking at, in terms of the profit analysis, are those profits on their whole global?
Yes. This is all declared accounts in the public sphere in all countries.
Okay.
And it's generation, trading, and supply.
So I think that is relevant, because clearly, if you're on the board of one of those companies and you think it's easy to make a profit on investment in a particular jurisdiction, for example the UK, than it is, say, for example, in Spain, you may decide, well, we've really got to invest in the UK because they've got a sensible investment framework, one that we can back, and we're not going to invest elsewhere. So it doesn't automatically follow from the analysis you're putting forward that people wouldn't invest. And it's also worth making the point that a lot of the investment that I think we're going to see in the UK over the next few years, which is essential investment, you will agree, won't be coming from the big 6 themselves. Clearly, they've got very strained balance sheets, some of them particularly strained, and we have not been expecting, our economists in DECC have not been expecting that they would be self-financing or even going to the debt markets themselves to fund the projects, but they will be partnering up with finance houses, banks, other investors from Europe and elsewhere. So it is simply not true to say that we expect the lion's share of the investment simply to come from the utility companies. It's going to come from other sources of capital.
Final question. I mean, in the light, if this is an accurate analysis, presumably you must have some lifeboat sort of options in the department if, say, EDF ceases to exist, if E.ON, they just withdraw totally. Presumably you've got people working on worst-case scenarios. Because my concern is, and it was a pretty sobering meeting with the people who presented this to me, is that we're sort of sleepwalking into a similar sort of banking crisis equivalent, where everybody makes decisions, some of which I didn't agree with, to intervene in the market in a panicky way because they're worrying about Armageddon and collapse and everything else. Is there any, do you think there's possibly a case here for the department to be working on worst-case scenarios? Because the impression I get from this is that we're potentially cruising to sort of lights out, managed power cuts in different regions type scenarios here. And I wouldn't want us to find ourselves as a country not being able to function properly because we hadn't anticipated the possibility that these companies would cease to exist.
Well, let me try to reassure you, because I don't think the Armageddon scenario you described is at all likely, and it's not going to happen, frankly. First of all...
Well, I'll keep you to that, Secretary of State, because I tell you what, if a company loses, like EDF has lost this amount of money in this short period of time, I tell you what, it strikes me it's more than possible.
Well, I don't think it's going to happen. If you look at our strategy for electricity security supply, let's just take that to start with. We've published documents last month, detailed documents on our strategy and where we believe we're at. We have three interlinked strategies. First, in the short term, National Grid and Ofgem are using the balancing powers they have in the 1989 Electricity Act to make sure that they will be able to meet any peak demand. We believe that the margins are fine for this winter and for next winter. They've got tighter to where they were, but we believe they are fine, and having the supplemental balancing reserve options which National Grid and Ofgem are currently consulting on will give us that extra reassurance that I think the public and industry require. Going beyond that towards the back end of this decade, one of the reasons why we're doing the capacity market auctions we were discussing about before is to ensure that we are incentivising that backup capacity to come, both on the demand side and the supply side. And of course, the longer term issue with security of supply is the whole of the energy bill. So I think we've got some extremely well thought through developed strategies. I don't see the problems that you are suggesting, not least because when I'm talking to investors in all forms of the energy infrastructure from all around the world, they think the UK is a very attractive proposition because we've actually got our act together.
Albert.